Winston Churchill once said, "I am always ready to learn, although I do not always like being taught." What's the best way to learn something, like physics, a foreign language, history? We spend a lot of time in school and are taught a lot of things, but rarely are we taught how to learn effectively. It's assumed we will figure it out, I guess. Most of us do learn a lot in school. And if we don't, at least we figure out how to be successful in school, which of course can be done without learning very much. Most teachers work hard to make their subject interesting and accessible. But besides the advice to work hard, pay attention, and challenge oneself, I'm not sure we get a lot of guidance on the behaviors that make an effective physicist, linguist, or historian. What it takes to learn physics is different than learning a language, which is different than learning history. While all subjects require you to be engaged to learn, art too, due to its nature, requires some different learning approaches from some other subjects. Art class is usually fun because usually you are making something in which you have a great deal of personal input and control. You get to exercise your creative side. You use cool materials and tools and you get to get your hands dirty. The atmosphere in art class is often more relaxed, like a studio rather than a traditional classroom. Because of that, it's sometimes easy to see art class as less rigorous than other courses, as if rigor is defined by the number of people who struggle with the subject. But think about it. In art, you have to learn to understand visual principles and decode visual symbols. You need to synthesize history, culture, language, and politics to fully comprehend a work of art. In art, there's no lazy thinking allowed. Often when you are analyzing artworks, there are no right or wrong answers, yet you have to be able to discern quality, make informed judgments, and defend your point of view using rational criteria. In the studio, you wrestle with inert materials, paint, clay, whatever, to make something that conveys meaning about the human experience. Are you kidding me? What could be more rigorous than that? Art is a very deep subject, and to really understand its complexity takes focus and discipline. But what does that mean? Focus on what? What kind of discipline? What behaviors make an effective art student?
You'd better realize that this was a life of suffering, struggle, and you weren't going to be any good anyway. I had to really find a way to believe in myself. You know, I think I did it by looking at the paintings in the galleries in Chicago. I would go every day and I would look at this particular de Kooning painting called Excavation. And I would almost like do a dance with it. Like, oh, he went this way, and oh, he went that way, and oh, he smudged this, and feeling like the depth of that painting. When you look at it from a distance, it looks like this roiling, boiling pot of paint, kind of. Except the order is in that paint. And when you go up to it, you begin to see, like, the layers of it. And I sort of deconstructed the painting, then I would go back down to my painting, and I would, like, try to do it. I never got that good, but it made me start to feel my body and my mind. My mind letting my arm make the decision.
When one thing was at the beginning easily recognizable as a foot or as a hat, now it's just become just a shape of color. Yeah, in the pile of fragments there is a huge variety, handmade and also found. This is from one of my drawings from a printed book. Here's papers from coloring books. This is a watercolor shape, acrylic on paper, crayon and ink, construction paper, printed paper, finger painting or painted directly applied from the tube, crayon also. Marbleized paper, paint by numbers, found in the second-hand shop. You can see it's very old. I'm interested in how can an image that is so well composed and is so clear and is so objective, it's made out of these disparate fragments, glued, forced to be together to create an image that will have a different reading from what the fragments, say.
Anywhere I move, these mounds seem to move with me. It's like in my car, there's like a pile of things. That's a mound. In my studio, there's piles of things all over the place, and that's how I pick from these piles. What's happening with the pieces that are in the studio, I see those as colorful blasts of energy or communication from mounds. These visions of hope. So in a way, it's like God's promise with the rainbow after the flood.
Now, if you could get me on camera doing a straight line, that would also be a historic shot. But it's not going to happen here. If you do look at my works, baseball, for instance, there is a kind of larger-than-life attitude to a lot of it. Not all the works are pure adulation of the ball players. Baseball has probably been my favorite since I was a child. The reason why I keep coming back to certain images is probably most often there's a visual quality that works for me. Whether you're throwing the pitch or batting the ball, you do have that sense of movement. And for an artist like myself, whose work is that one moment, that can be important.
There are a lot of tools that the artist has that the scientist doesn't have. Humor, irony, metaphor. These are sort of the bread and butter of artists. So we have two forms of tar here. One that's very, very liquid, and this one which is very like a paste. It's very viscous.
Where did these rats come from, Mark?
These come from a biological supply company. They have to read as rats, but not lab rats. They take the tar very well. You can kind of get different effects if you go with or against the grain of the fur. I bet they didn't teach you this in art school.
I'm real interested in trades, in ways that people make things which are not necessarily artistic. I mean, they're artistic in the sense that they can have formal beauty, but they're not done with an artistic motive. They're done often with a utilitarian motive. As a woodworker, I use tools all the time, and there's a certain art history to the evolution of woodworking tools in itself.
Looking at the work that I've done, I've noticed that things are sticking out of or into objects a lot. I think this has to do with my interest in explosion. But it also has to do with the aesthetics of pain. There is a very visceral response that the audience has to the work. They feel pain when they see the tigers. The tigers are realistically made, but they are completely fake. It's a stage setting that you enter into. It's through visual impact that you transmit these ideas, and it's through visual impact that this pain is felt. You can actually elicit a very direct response from the audience, a very strong response.
What are bottle caps? Liquor? How did liquor come into my culture? And what does it mean three continents has something to do with the initial ideas that I had about bottle caps. When the European traders came to Africa for the first time, they brought items to trade with, things like drink. Because eventually, drinks were exchanged for slaves, were brought to America to grow more cotton and sugarcane to make more drink, and then shipped to Europe. So the idea of three continents, and how drink was a link factor between the three.
The green-headed figures all had the same color head and same color skin. These new characters have a wider range of facial coloring. I mean, I'm just sort of fascinated how just those visual phenomena affect your reading of the figure. What a color does, you know, how it affects your eyeball. Sometimes I wonder, is that what it is about? I mean, you know, dark-skinned people, their face absorbs more light, so you have to look into them more. They're more mysterious. I mean, what is it, you know? Could racism be just attributed to bizarre visual phenomena, you know? There's a question.
I just said that I never make preliminary studies or anything, but for the Uber organ, I did make models of balloons. That process involved being approached by Mass Mocha, and they wondered what I would do with a space that was basically the size of a football field. I came up with this idea of using inflatables. I think I was just a little nervous about filling 15,000 square feet. I didn't want to get caught short-handed, so I felt much better seeing these little models in this space. It was going to have a real strong physical presence, but I felt like it needed to also have this audible component. There was a great moment when it was finally up and playing. I think for me it was just like hearing the first horn.
Series are appropriated images from other historical sources. Harvard threatened to sue me for the use of the first photograph that I showed you. So I thought, Harvard's going to sue me for using these images of black people in their collection. The richest university in the world. I think that I don't have really a legal case, but maybe I have a moral case that could be made that might be really useful to carry out in public. And so after worrying about it and thinking about it, I called them up and I said, I think actually you're suing me would be a really good thing. You should. And we should have this conversation in court. I think it would be really instructive.
My physical endurance and the extremely willpower, I think I got from my mother and my father. Because my mother and my father, they really believe in the communism and they believe in sacrifice for the cause. Your personal life was nothing. It's important what you are living for. Just like very, very stoic and very dedicated. That's how I was educated. My mother, when her water broke, when she was giving birth to me, she was having Communist Party meeting and she didn't want to stop before she finished it. And then she went to hospital and gave the birth to me. I was thinking it's normal. I was thinking this is how it's supposed to be. I didn't think that everything else can be different.
Fire! supposed to go that way.